We always hear don't put everything in one basket, so to speak. So we're going to talk about that when it comes to stock and sectors here on this episode of Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Phil and I talking about investing, finance, and retirement. You know, mama or grandmama always said don't put all your eggs in one basket. And so that's certainly something we all know. But and we know that when it comes to the conversation around stock, right? You shouldn't put all your money in one single stock. You could go Enron conversation or whatever you want to do there.
Right.
But what about talking about putting it all in a market sector, a strong market sector, Phil? So I want to discuss that this week here on the show. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Yeah. Hanging in there?
Hanging in there. Spring is here. We're campers out. We're ready to go. So
that's right. And you got the new grandbaby, right? So
new grandbaby's here. So little Teddy.
Yeah, that's right. What's the name?
Number 6.
Number 6.
Theodore. We're calling him Teddy. So
Teddy. Okay. Nice. Very nice. Well, if you're advising Teddy on the things that he needs to do, would putting everything in one, market sector be a good idea? Because again, we talk about the fact that you shouldn't just have everything in company stock. Let's say you work over at one of the big three, right? You don't want everything about your income tied into just them. You want to have other things, but what about a strong sector? What's your thoughts?
So, we've had that discussion before about the one company stock, and that comes into what we call the unsystematic risk of tied into one company. But the same thing really applies even as you come out to a sector, right? So, granted, so one company, that's the worst kind of risk, so to speak. It's very, very focused, right? It's not just a sector, but it's one company in that sector. So everything, then everything is in one basket. I would argue, even if you're backing out and saying, well, everything's in a sector, so automotive or whatever it is,
or tech. Tech is huge.
Same type of thing, right? So would you put everything you have in the NASDAQ? Well, a lot of that's going to depend on risk, right? Are you comfortable with that volatility? And that goes to any sector, but it's the same kind of concept. It's lesser risk than in one company in the sector, but it's still, I would argue, not diversified. True diversification is going to be across many strategies, not just sectors and
asset classes.
There's a lot of ways to diversify. So that's where you get into the systematic risk, just the risk in the market. The only way to hedge against that is more broad diversification. Because if you're, AI is the kind of leading the tech bubble right now. It's just going crazy, right? So you're jumping on that bandwagon, everything feels good. But what happens when that levels out or it goes through kind of a correction back to normality, right? That's the downside to sectors, right? Because everything's in one basket. When it's up, it's doing good. It's going to come down. Everything, everything goes up and down at some point in time, and that's where having more of that diversification, they help offset each other, and it's more of a balanced risk over time.
That's the point, right? Is when one area is down, you've hopefully got another area that's up. So it doesn't seem like there would ever be a good reason to do that, right? Just to throw everything into one sector.
This kind of gets to another interesting point on how do you approach investing and why are you investing, right? So if you're looking at sectors and that kind of stuff, to me, you're looking at it more, I don't want to say gambling, but it's more that type of it's a, how much can I make? What can I do? I'm speculating.
The tech is going to continue. Right.
Right. If you're approaching investing that direction, that's one piece of it. Right. But if you're in retirement, is that how you want to handle your retirement? I would argue no, because there's a lot of risk. You better have that discussion with your spouse first to make sure they're comfortable with it, because I can almost guarantee probably they're not.
Right. That's true.
Because I've had those discussions with clients where one client is very involved in the investment strategy. They're comfortable with risk. If they had it their way, it'd all be sitting in, a handful of company stocks that they've been comfortable with that have been up and down, but over the long period of time have done very well.
And your spouse is like, you did what?
But it's like, I'm down how much today? So it's very uncomfortable. So when you're approaching investing, it to me comes back to the plan, right? You've got to have a plan. What are you trying to get your money to do? What's the purpose of this basket of money?
Make more
and
money.
have the plan. Well, you see, and that's the thing is a lot of people's like, oh, I just want to make more money. Okay, well,
Right. I want
I
my
get that.
money to make more money.
Everyone wants to make more money,
Right.
but to make more money, you have to take more risk. And how much is more money and how much is enough? And, when are you going to need it? And, how does risk affect you? Because that's the whole other side of it too, is that even if you're comfortable with this kind of volatility, if I'm counting on that basket of money now to spend from,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say I've got into it now, and we end up in a correction, so now we're down 20, 30%. I'm still living from that money. So unless you're willing to quit spending and go back to work and wait for this to come back, then that's probably not the right strategy for all the money, right?
Right.
So
Right.
again, have a plan first. When you're looking at any investing, have a strategy first. And that's why when we do our financial blueprint, our roadmap, so to speak, we
Right.
don't talk investments at all because it has nothing to do with investments. It's cash flow, it's tax management. Out of that, now we understand what do you need when? How much money are we spending over what period of time? How should we be moving money for tax management strategies? Now that we understand that piece of it, now we can come back to the investment side and say, okay, this is what we need to do. What fits that specific scenario, for each different piece? And how does that compare to risk? Risk always needs to be, part of it for sure, but don't let risk drive the whole plan,
Yeah,
because
for
unfortunately
sure.
it's going to be good or bad. You're going to be either in the sunshine or the rain. And it's, we're trying to prevent that and have a little bit of both and, kind of that mild weather along the way. So,
Well, let me finish it with this question for you then. So, if it doesn't make a lot of sense from a diversification standpoint, and just kind of protecting yourself, especially again for a lot of our demographic, which is going to be a little bit older,
right.
um, same thing could kind of apply to the advisor conversation because we've got
Absolutely.
questions before where it's like, hey, I want to work with multiple advisors or different firms or whatever so
Right.
that I'm diversified. And is that really diversified?
Oh, I mean, so, and I can understand where people are coming from, right? They get worried about maybe the Bernie Madoff, syndrome, so to speak, of, well, I don't want to have everything in this one company because what happens if they go, something happens to whoever it is, Schwab or Fidelity or whatever, right? I don't want to have everything in one basket. Well, okay, I kind of understand that, but the downside to it is this, especially when it comes to the advisor. You don't want to have everything with one advisor because I want to diversify. When you get to retirement, you have to have a strategy and a plan. And I tell all my clients this, like, this is how we do things, right? We're going to run the plan. We've got a very specific investment strategy that we follow based on what your plan says we need and where money needs to be positioned. That's how we do it. So now if we're going to do this piece of it, another advisor is going to do another piece of it. Well, what are they doing? How does it fit into, are they using our plan that we developed?
Right.
They have no idea what our plan is. And so now I always liken it to, you've got two pilots trying to fly the plane, right? Who's doing what?
Yeah.
And if we're doing that, then I've got to understand what they're doing. But I'm not advising on that asset and I don't want to take the risk on that because it's not what, so it just becomes really difficult.
Think about it this way: it's
So,
like our legislative bodies' power, power
right.
at play. They might work near each other and they work in the same vicinity and about the same topics, but clearly they don't talk to each other, right? Clearly they're not sharing ideas very well, right? So it's not like if you're working with two different advisors, they're calling each other up on the phone and saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're strategy. It's not like two
Are
coaches
you
on a
doing
football
it?
team
It
that are in
just,
sync to get the team to bet. They're doing their own thing.
right. Every advisor has their own strategy and philosophy and how they do things, right? So that's why when you're in those early stages working with somebody and trying to pick somebody to help you through this stage of life, have those discussions right now, be comfortable with them up front and have that discussion. And with clients that are in that scenario, I understand it. And we don't have to have everything, but I always tell them, look, this is how it works. This is the plan we have. We've developed it together. This is what I'm following. Here's how we manage investments. And we've talked about the buckets before. So if we can come to an agreement that we're managing this bucket, that's fine. I know what my goal and my expectations are. I'll do that, and I'm following the plan according to that. I still need to have an idea of what the other advisor is doing just from a risk. So I'm, from a fiduciary standpoint, making sure that we're still, in risk tolerance, but I'm not managing what they're doing. And if you want to try to do that, we can see how that works. But at the end of the day, that kind of puts the client in the quarterback position now, because I'm not going to go to that advisor all the time and say, hey, what are you doing? We're not going to be having quarterly phone calls to kind of make the things work together. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking right there. That's a great point. It's like, okay, well, you're putting the onus back on yourself as the end user, the client, to say, all right, I've got to manage both of these people. And you might could sit out there and say, yeah, but it's my money. They're going to do what I tell them. They're going to work together. That's not the reality. I mean, maybe if you got $20 million, you might could throw that around, but I don't think that's going to really be the case for most people. So do you really want that responsibility back on yourself to manage two different advisors because they're each doing their thing independently? To me, it just seems like more headache and more complication and more room for error.
It's just, and the other side of it too is that, well, how do you judge who's doing a good job, right? So if I'm managing the soon bucket, my goal in strategy is very conservative. We're trying to provide income. If they're managing the later bucket, you're going to come to me in a year and say, well,
and their returns look great, and your returns
you're only
don't.
at 6% this year. They made me 13. Well, does that mean my portfolio was worse than theirs? Well, no, my strategy was different. My goals were different, so, but from a client standpoint, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that's not what it's looked at, right? It's like, well, show me the returns. Well, they made 30, I'm going to move here. Well, that's, you got at the end of the day, a proper, and I shouldn't even say it this way, but to me, somebody that is truly a quote unquote financial advisor, it's not just about the asset management. That's a big piece of it, sure. But it comes back to managing a plan, right? And that I always tell clients, look, there's two sides to this investment management. It is managing investments back to a plan. We're not just managing investments. We're following a plan, revisiting that, making sure we're on track, doing the conversions, whatever your plan says, making distributions, making sure we've got money in the right buckets based on the plan each year. So we're not letting the investments drive what's happening. We're letting the plan drive the directions the investment should go. So anyways,
right. Having that,
holistic having a holistic view. Can it be done?
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be. Again, it comes back to me at that point saying the client really is the quarterback, because now you've got the plan. You've told me you want me to do this piece of it. So the rest of it, I'm hands off. So it's your plan. So
having everything in one area is not a good idea. But when you're talking about that advisor piece, that's certainly interesting to think about it that way. Diversifying that up, the various buckets to different people probably is not the best way to go either. Having that one cohesive strategy with one team to help you, and a financial team, right? So it's an advisor, it's a CPA, it's all the different pieces. It's the Medicare specialist or the Medicare conversation. Maybe it's the estate planning, so on and so forth. That's a financial team. That's multiple people, but they're doing specifically individual jobs versus just a bunch of financial advisors, right? And and you're a financial advisor and a CPA in one.
So we're always looking at the tax side too. So
does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So can it be done? Sure. Personally, I've never seen it done well. It just, at the end of the day, it doesn't work well long term. Either the client gets tired of dealing with both sides, or it just doesn't work well long term.
So in this case, it would be too many chefs, not enough cooks.
Yep.
Right. So too many people making decisions and nobody actually cooking the meal, right? Kind of thing, versus too many cooks, not enough chefs. All right. Well, there you go. So that's our conversation this week. Thanks for hanging out with us as always. Don't forget to check the show notes and check out the links for Phil's book on Amazon as well. And make sure you go check that out. If you've got some questions, need some help, subscribe to us on Apple, Google, Spotify. Reach out to Phil at philstaxhacks.com. That's the podcast website, but that redirects you back to his main website to get some time on the calendar. Of course, we have the number up on the screen for those of you that are watching, but it's 248-888-7530. And we'll see you next time here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts.
Phil?
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.